Welcome to another edition of the Litigation Psychology Podcast, brought to you by Courtroom Sciences, Inc. I am Dr. Steve Wood, and on the podcast, we talk a lot about the topic of safety and how safety relates to nuclear verdicts and how it crosses all the different industries. And one of the industries we like to talk about is the trucking industry. And oftentimes we have attorneys on and we're talking to the attorneys about how to defend the cases, but not all the time do we have people who are on the other side of the actual litigation and those who see a little bit different aspect of trucking litigation. So I wanted to bring someone on today to talk to me about that. Joining me for the podcast today is Jay Blobner. Jay is a senior safety and risk manager at International Transportation Services, Inc. Jay, how the heck are you? Thanks for joining the podcast.
Hey, doing good. Hey, listen, thank you very much for the invite. It's great to meet with you again. And I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, so you have pretty interesting background about how you got to where you're at now. Could you give the listeners a little bit of an overview about where you started, how you come up, and then where you're at now?
All right, sure will. Yeah, I started when I got out of the Navy. I served in the United States Navy for 4 years, towards Vietnam. Got out in 1972. I went to work for New Mexico Transportation there as a ticket agent, also a porter. Did that for, about 8 months or so, and got hired on in December of 72 with United Parcel Service as a driver, and drove for them for 12 years. Then I got promoted as a supervisor, going into a driver training supervisor. And then I went into as a operations manager after that, and was with UPS for a total of 26 years. My driving career consisted of over the road and also local package delivery. And then after I left UPS, I got into logistics for a couple of years with the company, with working with third-party logistics with RCA, and left that and actually that's when I really got into the trucking business per se. I was a warehouse manager with a company for about 8-9 months, and they promoted me as a safety director, and been doing that for over 20 years. And I've had about 3 companies I've worked for. I've ended up here at ITS. I retired for a little while, and then I decided to come back to work, get back in the business, and it's been a long career, been a good, rewarding career.
Yeah, so you've been around, as we would say, and what have you kind of seen really as the 2 to 3 kind of biggest changes that you've seen throughout your course and in your career within the trucking industry?
Well, a couple of 2 or 3 things actually is the technology that's out there today compared to what we had 20 years ago, with what we can see now that we couldn't see before. And, the technologies are just continuing to get better and better and better. I mean, who would have ever guessed, 20 years ago, we would have had autonomous trucks, and it's a real deal. It's actually happening today. Several companies are already doing it, and, it's going to be something of the future. And, I think there's still some things they got to look at before full implementation, but, it's upon us. And the other thing I think is the CSA, compliance, safety, and accountability. We went from SafeSat and to CSA. Going into CSA, a lot of folks were saying, well, it's something that's never going to occur. It's not going to happen. It's not going to affect our insurance, those type of things. And unfortunately, those things did sprout, and they did come about and are actually fact today. And, CSA is basically our scorecard. It's our measurement with the DOT. And, it's something that I use religiously. It's not perfect, but right now it's all we have to work with. And it's something that we have to deal with on a monthly basis. And, it's been a good tool for me, something that I use and I look into. I log into my portal every single day and looking for, inspections.
Yeah. And so when you're talking about CSA and all these other different things, what is really a topic that you've seen, or what is an area that you've seen that you just wish more people would focus on?
What? I'd like to see more focus on the safety side of the business. I really think that we lack in that piece of it as an industry. And I think, especially with the COVID that came about, last year, and all the sacrifices we all had to make. I think that we need to get more data out there to the public and see more focus on, we are a safe company. I mean, a safe operation. We are a safe entity. And I just don't think there's enough of that out there, with public service announcements or whatever, to let the public know that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point you bring up, because we talked a lot about it on the podcast, as I mentioned at the very beginning, how the trucking industry is one of those who's really apt and prone to get whacked with these nuclear verdicts, right? Because whether or not the case facts warrant it, but to your point about whether or not the perception of the trucking industry as being unsafe and everybody's perception about truckers out there not paying attention, falling asleep at the wheel, and doing all these different things, I think, like you said, is probably made your industry more prone to that, for people to say, yeah, you know what, that's an industry that puts profits over safety. Yep. That's an industry it's not doing the things that it needs to do, and because it's not, people are getting injured. So now we need to send a message, right? So it feeds right into the reptile theory notion. So I think that's a good point about getting more focus on safety and getting it out there for people to know that, yeah, there's some safe truck drivers out there. Is there bad apples? Yeah, but you got some safe ones out there, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly right, Steve. And I mean, you brought up some very good points there. And, the industry, we're not going to sit here and say that we're everybody we have is a good person, or, they're out there. But we got some bad guys out there. Okay. We got some people out there probably shouldn't even be out there driving, but, overall we have a lot of good people out there working hard each and every day, and they're safe. And unfortunately, it only takes a small percentage of that, the 80-20 concept, where 20% of the industry is spoiling the 80% of the rest of the good people, and it gives a bad face to all of us, unfortunately, in the general public's eyes, and also sometimes in the courts.
Yeah. What do you see then really today as kind of the biggest challenge for you and for the trucking industry in general?
I'd have to say the biggest challenge is finding good quality drivers that have good backgrounds, clean driving records. It's very, very difficult. What we have found, we're a small company, and it's very difficult for us to hire individuals to get them to come into the door based off of the way that the pay scale is today with the larger corporations, the larger trucking companies. It's very, very difficult for us as a small company to bring those drivers in. What we attempt to do today, and we've been doing it for a while, is we're attempting to bring our rehires back, drivers that we've had work for us that maybe went off, and we're reaching out to them to see if they'd be interested in come back to work for us. Like everybody else, we've changed our pay scale and we've adjusted that. I think it's where it's very comparable to others in the industry. So that's something we're trying to do and get our drivers back, because the longevity means a lot to us. The old saying, the longer you have them, the better, safer they are. And I'm a firm believer in that.
Excellent. And one of the things we've also talked about too is on this podcast is we've talked a lot about with the defense attorneys and how defense attorneys prep cases and get ready for cases for trial. From your perspective in your role as a senior safety and risk manager, what is something that you thought, hey, if I had an opportunity to talk to a defense attorney and they came to ask me and they said, Jay, what do I need to know? What is the most important thing I need to know when I'm getting ready to come work up this case? What would you say to them is the most important thing in your opinion?
Steve, what I think I would say to them is get educated on the business, get educated in the business. I mean, whether it's going to through a truck driving school, whatever it may be, get that education, know what the business is all about, what our industry is all about, and the kind of people that we have, and, that work in this business day to day. And to, the company I worked for, I was in court 3 different times. And, we won 2 of the cases and lost 1, and we shouldn't even lost that one, but it is what it is. And, but I would really like to think, if I going back to your question, is to get the defense attorneys more educated on the business, the trucking business, and what it's all about.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I've seen things where nowadays plaintiff attorney firms are actually sending their attorneys to what's almost like a trucking school, so they can learn the ins and outs of the truck, and that way they can have a better idea, of places to attack, right? If you don't know the business and you don't know how to work up a case because you don't know the business, then it puts you at a disadvantage. But if say, from a plaintiff's perspective, and you know about hours of service violations, or you know about all these other aspects, it makes it a lot easier to try to work up a case to try to get a nuclear verdict and try to do all these different things, like you said, to talk about showing profits over safety. But on the flip side, for the defense counsel too, right, it helps them to know the ins and outs as well, so that they're just as skilled and up to date as plaintiff counsel. I've worked with some other transportation firms, and I know there's an attorney I work with who's been doing this for a very long time, and I think he can cite the handbook better than half the employees. He knows all the different things, and he can use all the terminology and the lingo that these operators are using, or these other staff are using. He can use it just as if he was one of their employees. And I think, to your point, one, it makes him more knowledgeable on defending the case, and then two, it builds his credibility, right, with his witnesses, because now they say, okay, this guy gets it, this guy understands our business, this guy can speak and talk the lingo. It just makes your life that easier, right, from a defense attorney perspective. So I think that's a good point to talk about, and we've been harping on that too. And I've talked to a lot of attorneys, and they seem to point to the same thing you're saying about learn the business, whatever it is. So I think that was a great, insightful thought of you there to point that out. And you mentioned about how you had gone to trial before, and there's a couple different times you went to trial and there was an outcome. As we know, I've talked about it before, that nuclear verdicts are a very real possibility for the trucking industry. What is your level of concern about nuclear verdicts, and what is it that you're doing to help prevent those from happening?
Well, my thought on it, Steve, is it's a shame. Years ago, we didn't have these kind of verdicts like we do today. You didn't see it on TV. You didn't see it on the billboards as you drive through the different metroplexes and out on the road. You just didn't see that, if you're hit by a truck, call Chuck type thing. And it's unfortunate, and what I've done and what I've been doing for quite some time is trying to screen our drivers coming in the best we can. We road test every single one of our drivers. We take them out and we do about an hour to hour and a half road test with them, about 25, 30 miles. And we look at their background like everybody else. We screen them, and, anything questionable in there, we're certainly going to bring it up with the driver. But we have to do, as safety directors and safety managers and the safety industry, we have to do our due diligence in this business. You can get on TV any time of the day just about, and you see some lawyer on there wanting to sue you. And if you have a truck accident, I've always tell drivers, if you look at those commercials, the person that collected that $400,000, $500,000, you don't see one tear in their eye when they get that check from the attorney, right? So, that's something that I use, and I in my orientation, and I really bring it up and hammer on it with the drivers, that not only can a company be sued, but they can be sued as individuals. And, it's not to put the fear factor in them, but to create the awareness.
Yeah, I think, pointing out the fact that they could be sued as individuals, I don't know how a lot of witnesses may not understand that. And when they go into a deposition, if they're being sued, then all of a sudden that shock factor of, well, I'm being named individually, then all of a sudden it shoots their emotionality, it shoots their stress, their anxiety, all that stuff through the roof. And then, when we're working with them and training them, that's one of the things we have to overcome first before we do anything else, is this shock of, oh my God, I'm actually being sued individually. So I think that's good. And you're talking about the industry and whether or not you're talking all the billboards, all the different things that are out there for plaintiff firms that are looking to get people to sue the trucking industry. We're hopefully on the back end of COVID-19, and, we're hopefully getting back to a sense of normalcy. But from your perspective, what did you see? Did you see from COVID-19, from pre-COVID at the height of it to kind of where we're at now? Has the industry changed? Has perceptions of truck drivers changed in the industry?
Well, Steve, I hope it has. I think it has. I think it's created a very good awareness with the public of what what the trucking industry does and how important trucking is to us, and how important it is to this country and to the world. I mean, look at the shortages we had in the stores, in the grocery stores. water, toilet paper, essential, everyday essentials that we use, people didn't have. And it created a very big panic with folks. And I think, I like to think, and I hope it did create a very good awareness to the public that things like this can happen. And it doesn't get there unless a truck brings it, and it takes a truck driver to drive that truck to get it delivered to the dock, to get it stocked on the shelves. And we were very fortunate in our case. We had very few drivers that had any problems with the COVID. We did all of our due diligence and making sure we had all the proper PPE available to them. And they went out there and did the job. And I think the public has really seen a little different view of what our industry is about.
Do you think it's something, though, that you guys should take your foot off the gas, or do you think you should even push forward? I mean, I've seen one I can think of where it's actually a sign. It's a small sign on the side of the road as you're headed towards Houston, and it's like right on a person's property. It says, thanks to you truckers for all that you do. But is that enough, or do you think the trucking industry needs to start doing more, buying their own billboards, putting their own commercials up there of, just getting it out to the public, like, hey, don't forget when you needed that toilet paper, who brought it to you?
No, I think you're absolutely correct. And, I think what we need to do, in my opinion, is the industry itself needs to get more of the positive aspects of what we do out to the general public, whether through public service announcements on TV, social media. I mean, there's all kinds of outlets out there available to us to do that and show the positive aspects of our business. Hey, if you bought groceries, and you thank a trucker, because that's the guy that did it. He's the guy that's in that truck, and they're a very, very tough job to do on a day-to-day basis. And, it's very important to get that message out there. I think we need, as an industry, to do more to get that message out. Like you said, that small sign. Well, hey, let's create a billboard. Let's put it on TV instead of these negative ads by these plaintiffs' attorneys wanting to come after us because we're the low-hanging fruit, if you will, to them. Let's counteract that with something positive and come back and show them what we're really about.
Yeah, you said low-hanging fruit. Do you see, going back to nuclear verdicts, do you see the trucking industry as a low-hanging fruit? Do you see as those are the ones who are more susceptible or just easy targets for these nuclear verdicts and litigation?
I do. And the reason I say that is because if you look, there are companies out there that have gone out of business because of these nuclear verdicts. There's several out there right now that have major, major dollar amounts attached to them, millions and millions of dollars. And, I think there's companies out there that they look at this and, well, is it worth fighting, or should I just go ahead and write the check? Going back, as I alluded to earlier, the court cases I was in, I was very fortunate to work for an owner that fought. And like I said, we should have won all three. Unfortunately, we didn't. But the third one was a substantial amount of money that was awarded. It wasn't what they were asking, but it was still a substantial amount of money that was awarded to that person. And I think these nuclear verdicts, in my opinion, are just overrated. I mean, I think they're just going after us, as well, we're going to sue, and I know Texas has changed and the laws changed, where now it's a little different than what it used to be, where they just, pick and choose who they want to sue. There's a little more to it now, a few more steps that have to be taken for that process to take place. But, the bottom line, when I see these commercials, Steve, it really irks me to know that they're painting this picture with this broad brush of this industry. Oh, we're just a lot of, outlaw truckers out there, and we're not a safe entity.
Yeah, no, good point. Jay, I appreciate the time. I want to wrap up. If you had one thing that you wanted to let the listeners know, let other people know about the trucking industry that maybe gets overlooked. I think you've mentioned it a little bit here, but what would be kind of your one concise elevator speech, 30-second, what do we need to know about the trucking industry?
But what I can say is, let's get the positive aspect of our business out there. Hire the right people. Just don't hire seat warmers. Don't put a driver in a truck that you don't feel is going to be safe just to generate that X amount of dollars for that month of revenue, because it can certainly, completely kick you in the butt later on if he has a crash. But do your due diligence. Do your due diligence. Anybody in safety, do your due diligence. Get the positive aspect out there, and we got to paint that positive picture to the public Because I think, like you said, Steve, we talked about the COVID. Let's get back to that. Let's show the public that, hey, we are a safe industry for the most part. We do a good job. We work hard, but as a safety manager, I can tell you that we have to continually be on top of the business and be on top of what we're doing and making sure we're compliant with everything we do.
All right. Jay, I appreciate the time. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, talk to you more, talk to you about any other topics, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, my email address is jblobner@itstrucks.com. And that's the letter J.
Great. And I can be reached at swood@courtroomsciences.com. We have a lot of content, podcasts, blogs, other materials up on courtroomsciences.com. I encourage you to go take a peek at it. This has been another edition of the Litigation Psychology Podcast brought to you by Courtroom Sciences, Inc. Thanks for joining.